Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, going back to 2001 as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Freedom Call's sophomore effort, Crystal Empire. But before we talk all things Freedom Call, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I was very excited about this episode. I feel like it's been a while since we sat down and talked about an album. And this is the first one I've chosen in a while, so that makes it all the more exciting as well. And a lot of news, a lot of new stuff. I feel like we have a lot to talk about. I think we should just dive right in.
I agree with you. I want to mention a couple of, I don't even know where to start. I feel like the news is so big that I want to start there, but I'm not. I'll go with some of the new stuff that I've been listening to. Did you have a chance to listen to the new Textures album? This was one of the most fascinating listens that I've had so far this year. And I say that because I think I've probably listened to their new album more than any other album this year. And it doesn't mean it's my favorite album of the year. It just means I've listened to it a lot. And the album is called Genotype. There's one track in particular, At the Edge of Winter, and it features Charlotte Wessels, formerly of Delane, and that track is absolutely fantastic. It's probably my song of the year to this point, but the rest of the album is really cool. And I can't figure out if I love it or if I just merely like it, but there's something really interesting about the way this band mixes like progressive metal and metalcore and the layered keyboards and whatnot. Just a really interesting listen. Have you had a chance to check it out yet?
The song, yes. The album, no. I've heard the
what
song
did you think
a couple
of the
times.
Song?
Loved it. I thought it was really cool. It was a cool kind of almost like mixture of genres, like you mentioned. But when you throw in Charlotte, it just brings it up a level for me. So I liked it a lot. Shout out to Knops, I think, for putting it on my radar. But I need to check out the rest of the album. It's a band that I haven't heard a ton of here and there over the years, but this was definitely got my attention for sure.
Yeah, just really, really cool stuff. I almost don't know what to make of it, but for some reason, this was really good. And another band that I had missed, really. The album came out last August, but the band is called In Pathos. They're an American band. The album is called Apparitions. I heard some music from them. I really enjoyed it. That was kind of out of left field, but really good metal from them. And the singles are just coming like fast and furiously. I know that there's probably a bunch that you want to get into, so I'm going to turn it over to you, but I just wanted to mention those two albums.
Yeah, I had mentioned in the last episode that there was two things in particular that I wanted to talk to you about. The first being a project that I think we made mention of from our friend Johannes Freekholm of Skyblazer fame. He has started this project called Dream Seeker, which is a symphonic power metal tribute to Chrono Trigger, and it is more of rather than like the songs being like covers of the game music, it's more like songs like inspired by the game. And the first single was dropped. It's called Medieval Mystery. It also the single also has a little orchestral reprise of like a minute, which is kind of cool. I plan on putting both of those tracks on my next playlist, and I have that Textures track on my previous playlist. I think it's up. I don't remember, but if not, it'll be up soon. But anyway, have you had a chance to listen to Medieval Mystery, and if so, a penny for your thoughts?
Yeah, this is really interesting stuff, and I'm looking forward to the album. I think that games or video games, especially RPGs or games like Castlevania, really lend itself to, or it's just the music of those games is a real big attraction. And so when you blend metal, which is not really that far removed from like an RPG in many ways. I love it, and I think his songwriting's fantastic. I want to hear more from Skyblazer, obviously, as well. Hoping that we get a chance to speak with him in the coming weeks and days ahead, so that we can pick his brain and see where this thing came from and how it started, etc. Because it's a really fascinating idea from a game that's widely heralded as one of, if not the best, Super Nintendo game of all time.
Some people would argue it's maybe the greatest game ever made, especially if you're a fan of RPGs. But this first track is definitely a great preview of what's to come. Vocals done by both Johannes and Narcissa MacArthur, who's an American vocalist. And I really love the pairing of that. It's one of the things I think, you didn't get a sense of with this first Skyblazer album, because it was just, Johannes singing on his own, and it was cool to hear him kind of do a duet. So I'm excited for that. Item number 2 of at least 3 that I want to mention is the new Seventh Wonder, not just a new single, but we have a vocalist. After months, I don't think it's been has it been over a year since they said that Tommy was leaving the band? It's been a while, but they finally, much like other bands that will be mentioned, they finally made an announcement. And Matthias Olofsson is the new vocalist for Seventh Wonder, and they dropped the first track with him. It's a John Norum cover, Eternal Flame. I was not familiar with this song, to be honest with you, so I saw some people that weren't thrilled about the cover, and I don't know if it's because they had a high thought or high praise for the original. I went into it, to me, it was just an original song. I like it a lot. I think that the new vocalist, Matthias, fits in really well, and it has all those sounds that you've come to love from Seventh Wonder, like the keyboards and the bass that I think are very distinct sound. So I'm really glad that they are going to continue. Over the years, they've actually eclipsed Camelot for me as the band that I prefer.
Wow.
And I think that they have such great songwriting, and I'm just a big fan. So I enjoyed this single a lot, and I'm excited to hear the new singer with some original material.
Yeah, I'm eagerly awaiting that as well. I think, and we've talked about this offline, there are some bands where it's nearly impossible to replace a member. And then there's other times where you can replace a member who you might think is irreplaceable, and it winds up being relatively seamless. And so we're going to talk about this much more in long form during our Patreon exclusive bonus episode later this month. I'm looking at you, Camelot, but I just, it's interesting because you never really know until you get that original material. And this is going to lead to one of the news items for later. It's not just the person's vocal talents in a case like this, but it's also how they help with the songwriting or the lyrics, or even adding vocal lines to pre-existing music with their own ideas. And so, the jury is still out on this. I don't know how the new album is going to be. I do think that they peaked with Mercy Falls. I think that the albums that came after that were good, but that was their magnum opus of sorts. And so I say that all to say, we'll see, but I'm cautiously optimistic after hearing the cover.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't really know how much Tommy Karavik creatively had anything to do with Seventh Wonder as far as songwriting goes and that sort of deal. I believe Andreas Blomqvist, their bass player, does a lot of the songwriting. So I'm thinking that the core sound is going to remain intact. But I mean, if you're a fan of Seventh Wonder from the beginning, then you'll know
You've
that
already
this is not
experienced this.
this is not their first vocalist change anyway. So I this is, I think, going to be one of those bands where I think I'm going to be okay with the new singer, but I'm really excited to have that discussion with you on the bonus episode about bands where replacement members just weren't that just wouldn't click for me, and that I kind of lost my love of certain bands for that reason. And then there's other bands like, you know, Halloween and Sabotage come to mind, where, you know, they've had vocalist changes and that hasn't really been as much of an issue. The thing about that is that we got into those bands after the vocalist change was made. So we heard John and Zach Sabotage and Kisk and Darius Halloween all at the same time. So we didn't really have like a period of time where we had to kind of mourn the loss of somebody. But now that we've been, you know, fans of metal music for almost 30 years now, there's going to be more modern examples and stuff like that we can talk about. So that's going to be an exciting discussion. I'll mention also Master Plan has finally dropped a new single called Chase the Light. They have a new album coming out finally. It's going to be called Metamorphosis, and it will be released on June 26th on Frontiers Records. This is their first, not counting the Halloween covers album from 2017. It's their first album in 13 years since Novum Initium was released in 2013, which I think was the year before we saw them at Prague Power. So, I mean, it has been a long time. They released one of the singles, Rise Again, back in 2024. That's going to be one of the tracks on the album. And now they have another track called Chase the Light. I think if you enjoyed Novum Initium, this is right in that same ballpark. Rick Altsey back as vocalist. You know, your classic rolling grappo guitars, Jari Kanalainen on bass. And yeah, I guess since I've already mentioned most of the band, Axel McEnroth, original keyboardist or almost original keyboardist, and new drummer Kevin Kott, who also has drummed for Almanac and Advance. And also did some touring with Freedom Call, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I'm excited for this as well. There's a lot of cool stuff, I think, shaping up for not as many like big heavy hitters like there were last year that we were speculating at the beginning of last year. But this is one that's, I think, is going to be pretty big on both of our radars.
Yeah, we're in the throes of it, my friend. There's no question about it. March is just around the corner. We've kind of got our schedule planned for the next few weeks. I had alluded to next week's album at the end of our last episode insofar as inspiration came to me. And as I mentioned, we'll be sticking in 2001 next week. But yeah, lots of good stuff from bands that we know and love. And then obviously, like we said, new music from Dreamseeker and some others. So looking forward.
Did you happen to hear the new Green Carnation single?
I have not. Now, I have heard fantastic things about their new album, Part 2, and the Part 3 apparently is coming out later this year as well. But I have shied away from the single. I almost want to hear the whole album. I loved that album last year, and I'm so looking forward to this. But I almost want to hear the whole thing as a complete package. I don't think it's going to be a very long album, just because they've cut it into so many parts at this point. But did you get a chance to hear it?
I like it a lot, actually.
Nice.
It's called Sanguis Blood Ties, which is, I guess, the title track, because it's a dark poem, Part 2, Sanguis, which I believe is Latin for blood. I really enjoyed Part 1, and this is just a continuation of that for me. It has a very like 70s prog rock keyboard kind of sound to it, which I really, really like. This band is really impressing me lately. I always kind of lump them into like the more depressing prog metal category, but I feel like the last album had a little bit more oomph to it for me, and so I really enjoyed that. And I guess I'll mention one other thing. Mirath also dropped a new single called "Soul of My Soul." They have a new album also on the way. That one's going to be called "Wilderness of Mirrors," and that comes out March 27th on Ear Music. So looking forward to that. That's their first album since 2024's Karma. They've been pretty consistent in their releases, so looking forward to that as well. I could probably name a bunch of other stuff too, but I'll hold it at that. Just a lot of good stuff, and I know we had a couple of weeks to kind of catch up on stuff. So I will post this playlist. I think I need to just add one more song to it, and then it should be good to go. But it'll have the new Master Plan, the new Green Carnation, the new Mirath, the Dream Seeker that I mentioned, amongst other things. So keep an eye out for that.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so in the archives, we covered Stairway to Fairyland, Freedom Call's debut album. And it was an album that we both really, really liked. It was in that German power metal vein of a Gamma Ray or a Halloween for obvious reasons, given the members of the band and the connections that still elucidate to this day. Fitting, of course, that we now go to their second album, Freedom Call's Crystal Empire, which came out January 22nd of 2001. The lineup is the same. Chris Bay on vocals and guitar, Sasha Gershner from Now in Halloween on guitars, Ilka Ersin on bass guitars, and Gamma Ray's drummer at the time, Dan Zimmerman, on drums. This would be Sasha's second and last album with the band. He would go on to join Halloween just a couple of years later. And I have always found this album fascinating for a number of reasons. But part of it was that I liked the debut so much that when this came out, I was super, super excited for it. Unfortunately, and I don't really know why, it never, in my mind anyway, lived up to the debut. And I don't know why, because a lot of the elements from the debut are on this disc. We'll get to that. But I played the crap out of this thing in 2001 and 2002, and I'm not sure I've listened to it in over 20 years. That's how long it was. But as I went back to it this week, it came back to me like I was listening to it, yesterday. So kudos to them. It was it was easy to dive back in. As to whether I liked it more or less or about the same, we'll get there. But what were your impressions of this album when it first came out now 25 years ago?
I got the CD when it came out or some time thereafter, because I like you, I enjoyed that first album so much. And I don't know if I just listened to it like a couple of times and wasn't that impressed. I didn't really give it much thought for a long time. And then as I became a fan of the band over the years and they would return back to some of these tracks on live albums, the title track comes to mind, Farewell, Ocean, The Quest, some of those tracks, on their live DVDs or live CDs. And I was like, oh, wow. I might have missed or just overlooked this album. And so, I can't remember if I had gone back and listened to it again when I decided that I wanted to cover it. It was on my, it was in my list of things that I wanted to talk about. But when I noticed that it, was celebrating an anniversary, almost, a little over 25 years ago, the timing just seemed right. And because of the break that we took while you were, at sea, ahoy. I listened to this a lot, like more than I would typically listen to an album prepping for an episode of the podcast. And then I couldn't stop listening to it. I got obsessed with it. I just looked forward every day to putting it on. I must have listened to it maybe 7 or 8 times. And I made a big mistake by just not giving this the time of day it deserved when it came out. And it's interesting because a lot of people will say that Eternity, which is their third album, might be their best album. I don't know that one well enough to make that call, although there are a couple songs on there that are some of my favorite Freedom Call songs, like Land of Light and Metal Invasion, which I think are still staples in their live set. So we'll definitely circle back to Eternity in the future. Yeah, this one just really, really caught me off guard. I will say, like, I was really blown away by it, and I just as a spoiler to the end of the episode, like, I think I'm going to rank this one quite a bit higher than the debut.
Wow. So it's interesting. Number one, we both had a similar experience with this album when it came out. Obviously liking it to various degrees, but kind of writing it off and not really. And again, I want to be clear. I played it a lot when it came out, and I kept waiting for it to wow me, and it never did for the year or two that I listened to it. And I listened to it a lot. So I don't want to make it seem like I just glossed over it. I gave it a lot of time. It just never clicked. Ironically enough, though, I have a confession to make, and I will say that because of my experience with this album around 2001, I don't think I ever really gave Eternity the time of day. I don't remember that album at all. And even some of the albums that come out after it, I really don't know their discography that well. There's one or two albums that come out after this that I really do love. But by and large, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on the discography of this band, in part because Crystal Empire was like, all right, I got my fill. I see what the band is, and I'm done with them. So it was a really interesting listen to go back with the benefit of hindsight, seeing what the band had done through the years. Again, not that I was an expert, but just kind of giving this the new fresh coat of paint that I guess it clearly deserved for you. So it's just a really interesting choice, and not something we often get to do. We usually have our opinions cemented on some of this stuff, that for albums that we know well. And I do know Crystal Empire very well, like I said, but this one, this was different. How many times do you think you listened to it?
Oh, probably more than a half dozen easily. I listen to it almost every day for the last 2 weeks. And I never got tired of it. Granted, like when this album came out, I was my interest in metal was waning. And much like you, like my knowledge of Freedom Call has really wavered over the years. Because Eternity, like you, that one I was just like, I don't even think I even had it when it came out. When Circle of Life came out. And what's interesting is it came out about a year and a half after Crystal Empire. It wasn't like it was 5 years later. It was right on the heels of this. Well, back then, that year and a half was like an eternity for me. But
no pun intended.
Circle of Life came out in 2005, and I remember that was a time where I really wasn't listening to much metal, but that was an album I listened to quite a bit and liked a lot. And I remember feeling like I was like one of the only people who really dug that album when it came out. Star Child being probably arguably my favorite Freedom Call song ever. And then Dimensions would come out in 2007. Then by the time Legend of the Shadow King came out in 2010, I was kind of back in the metal realm. But I don't think it was really until Beyond came out in 2014 where I was like really listening to albums like start to finish multiple times. And at that point I was like, oh yeah, wow, Freedom Call really does still have it. And I was a big fan of their most recent album. I think I had it as my runner-up for Album of the Year a couple of years ago. That's how much I enjoyed it. So yeah, part of the reason that I chose this was just because I always felt like it was something that I had not paid close enough attention to. And I will repeat myself when I say that about other Freedom Call albums that we cover in the future, including Eternity. But this is like an album that going into it, I would have said like, oh yeah, this is probably going to be like a 7 or a 7.5 at best. But I mean, some of these songs I might as well have been listening to for the first time, like, because it just felt like a fresh experience. And the songs that I did already know, I just never got sick of hearing repeatedly, obviously. So, yeah, this was a really interesting exercise.
Nice. I'm glad you chose it because, admittedly, by my own admission, obviously, I don't know that I would have gone back to listen to this had you not recommended it or had we not covered it. Just because it got lost to time, and as many things often do, unless they are earth-shattering. So I think with that backdrop, we've introduced the band. We mentioned January 22nd of 2001.
I actually have I called in a little help on this one.
Pinch hitter.
Yeah, our friend Steve Scott of PowerQuest actually works with the Freedom Call and does a lot with their stage presence, like lighting and photos and things of that nature. And he's also a fan of the band. And I reached out to him and just asked him if he had any memories that he wanted to share about this album. And he did. And this is coming from Steve Scott. He said, it was Sam Totman from Dragon Force who first introduced me to Freedom Call. He gave me a cassette with Freedom Call's debut on one side and Vision Divine's self-titled album on the other. And
That's not a bad tape.
No, not at all.
Bad tape.
And I was instantly hooked on both bands. At the time, we were just starting out as Dragonheart, which of course later became Dragon Force. We went to see Freedom Call play at the Underworld in London and then again at Wacken. All of the Dragon Force guys made the trip, and that was actually where I met Chris Bay for the first time. A great memory from those early days of the power metal scene. Crystal Empire quickly became a regular spin at my flat in London. I remember hearing the song Freedom Call and thinking it was a brilliant move to name a track after the band. Read into that all you want. The production on this album is superb, with Charlie Bauerfein, known for his work with Helloween, producing and mixing alongside Dan Zimmerman and Chris Bay in the Hamburg studios. This album also featured Sasha Gerstner, who would later join Helloween, and the powerhouse drummer Dan Zimmerman, one of my favorite drummers across all Freedom Call releases. His songwriting partnership with Chris really shines here. He said his top picks were for Freedom Call, Farewell, Ocean, and The Wanderer. And he made some comments about some of the songs in depth, and I'll get into those when we get up to those songs. But he finished with, my song and pick of the week is Ocean. So just to wrap this all up with a bow for Justin and a shout out to Chris. Overall, this is a great second album packed with hooks, melody, and pure catchiness. A classic slice of uplifting power metal. 8 out of 10 for me. So
nice. I love that. And I love The Ocean too. We'll get there. It was nearly my track of the week. Spoiler. I love that. I can't wait to talk about this. I've been sitting on this because I listened to it a lot, and in some ways it was like I said, it came right back to me. In other ways, it was like I was listening to it for the first time because I was actually appreciating it more than I did 25 years ago. So this starts with The King of the Crystal Empire, which is this short kind of, I don't know, call it spoken word intro type of track. Really not much there, but it's just a lead into Freedom Call, the track that Steve mentioned earlier. And this song, in many ways, at least to me, is very reminiscent of the debut album. It's just that riff-based, happy flower power metal that's exceptionally catchy. And Bay just sounds so good on the verses when it's him and a piano. I think that combination is magic. The verses are catchy and upbeat and bright. And it really, the chorus kind of features that like double riff that permeates this entire song and almost defines the era of power metal for me. I particularly enjoy the bridge on this track. I think it jumped out to me for the first time ever, just how good the bridge was. And I heard it almost as like a battle cry, especially when you factor in the gallop and the lyrics. Really, really solid opening tune. I
cannot disagree. This picking a song of the week for me was a huge struggle because I'm not going to lie. One of the reasons why I think that this is a better album than the debut is because I don't think there's one bad song on the album. I mean, there's no bad songs on the debut either, but there were songs that I actually went back and re-listened to the first album just to see, currently how it stacks up rather than just looking at a score I gave it years ago when we covered the album. And there are some songs, particularly towards the end, and I'm sure I mentioned it in the episode, that were just kind of okay for me. I don't feel that way about any of the songs on this album. I think every song is at least very good to great.
Are the highs as high as the debut album?
Maybe. I don't know. I would say yes. I think that this song in particular, the title track, or I guess the band name track, not title track, but this is one of the band's best songs of all time. It's a brass sound coming out of a keyboard, and it's very triumphant and almost like royal. And there's something that
Regal would be the words that I would use.
Lord Stephen Regal. It takes the music to a whole other level, and they were doing that on the first album. They're doing it again here. Their songs have such an anthemic quality to them, and this one is no exception. I think I'm just going to make it my song of the week before I get lost in the rest of the album. It's just that good of a song. It's still one of the staples of the live Freedom Call experience. I would love to get to see these guys live again.
I was so happy, and I know we've talked about this, and we'll play the track. But when I missed them at Prague Power, I was upset. That was one of the bands on my list that year that I said to myself, I'm never going to see them again. And when they were finally announced for 70K, and that was out of left field, I was so happy to finally see them. And I'll never forget the set for many reasons, but not least of which it was the first set on the pool deck that year. So it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and fortunately not hungover, and I went up to the pool deck in the bright Caribbean sun and saw them, and I'm like, check it off the list. Not that I wouldn't see them again, but it was like it was almost the redemption for the missed opportunity in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I definitely was missing you during that set. I remember thinking, like, damn it, I can't believe of all the bands that played that year, there weren't probably Freedom Call and Green Carnation were the two where I was like, oh man, these are the two that I think Justin really should have been here for, really would have appreciated, even if you had to miss the whole rest of the festival. Those two in particular. I want to say they played that track too, but I would love to see the band again, maybe do like an old school kind of set. And like when you really look at this lineup of guys, Dan Zimmerman is a legendary drummer for Gamma Ray. Sasha Gerstner is a legendary guitarist for Halloween. Chris Bay is a legendary vocalist for Freedom Call. This is like Germany's power metal greatest hits. Didn't last long for only 2 albums, but it was a pretty magical union. So anyway, let's give a listen to Freedom Call, and we'll come back. I'm psyched to hear what your song of the week is, and there's still a lot of good music to talk about. So here it is, Freedom Call.
Standing by my side, you're breathing freezing once before. Telling tales of emptiness and more. Strangers in the night, rising up to fight, rising up to bust the demons' spell. Freedom call, the cry of barren souls, the surveillance of mankind will fall. Freedom call, the cry of barren souls, under surveillance we never will fall.
That was Freedom Call, the first main track on Crystal Empire, your song of the week. And before the break, you said, you can't wait to hear what my song of the week is. And I'll be honest, you're not going to have to wait very long, because Rise Up, the next track, is my song of the week. I don't want to listen to it just yet. I want to kind of set the stage here, if you will. But tell me your thoughts on Rise Up, and then I'll kind of walk you through why I selected track 3 as my song of the week.
This is my song of next week, and then the song after that will be the song for the week after. I mean, take your pick. This is another outstanding song. All those things that we love about Freedom Call's first album and the first track from this album, it continues on here. Just, you know, again, like that really anthemic, almost like triumphant march-like sound that Freedom Call just does so well. The songwriting is just, there's so many catchy little, like, you know, little riffs here, little hooks there, little fills, like it just, there's like key changes on certain songs. Like just, there's just always something happening that's just so infectious about this music. And this song is right on the list with that too. I think this is another outstanding track. And so I don't blame you one bit. I think this one did sound vaguely familiar when I went back to listen to the album again. The first 3 tracks really in particular. I think Farewell I probably knew the most out of all of them. But I mean, I wouldn't have had an issue with you choosing any song on this album, quite frankly.
The way that this starts with the guitars and the drums behind it is absolutely fantastic for me. I love the way this song starts. And then when it finally gets going, the pace is even faster than the first track. This is maybe the fastest song on the album. It has kind of a really blistering sound to it. And I just, again, I love the keyboard sound on this track. Arguably Chris Bay's best vocal performance on the album for me. And I think the reason it became my song of the week was just those infectious melodies and those subtle changes of pace throughout. The bridge has almost an RPG-like quality to it, which I thought was really interesting. And this was another one that could have seamlessly been on the debut and you wouldn't have blinked, just in terms of style. There's some other stuff that we'll get to that really sounds different, and they actually explored some different elements in the songwriting. This is not it. This is very much in line with the debut.
I feel like the last couple of weeks I've been living in fantasy land, because I've been playing Dragon Quest II while listening to Freedom Call, and it's just like, maybe that's why I've been in such a good mood. Like,
there you go. If that doesn't do it, I don't know what will. There's something else that I want to say about this track, but before I say it, let's give it a listen. My song of the week, Rise Up. All right. I want you to go and cue up this track from about 1 minute and 10 seconds. And when you do, when you get to the 1 minute and 15 seconds, you're going to hear Chris Bay start singing over and over. And the way he does it is exactly the same as something else. Can you hear it? Do you pick it up? Because when I noticed this, I almost fell out of my chair. But to me, it was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So go back to 1 minute and 15 seconds of Rise Up and listen to Chris Bay sing over and over and tell me what you think. Does that remind you of anything?
It's definitely something familiar about it, but I can't put my finger on it.
Now go and listen to Royal Hunt's Message to God.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Listen to DC Cooper sing over and over. And so I'll tell you what happened. I was listening to this album, obviously, in anticipation of the episode. And then I saw Royal Hunt on the cruise. And they sang Message to God. And I'm like, oh my God, I just heard this. Freedom Call just did it. And it was like an epiphany of sorts. Because obviously the two bands sound nothing alike. But for that measure, oh my God, it's like exactly the same.
Now that you mentioned it, there was something about it that just was like, I could tell it was familiar. I just couldn't put my finger on it. So nice callback there.
Nice. I was a little surprised that Farewell wasn't your song of the week. I actually had this on my list as like, you're going to love this song. This is about as happy-go-lucky power metal as you can get. The verses, the word I would use to describe them is bouncy. It's a little repetitive, but it's so solid that it doesn't matter. And it doesn't overstay its welcome because the song is not that long. It clocks in under 4 minutes. And I like the way they build to that very catchy chorus. This, again, follows the same formula. And one of the other things that happens on this track is the verses and the chorus overlap a little bit. Like the verse is just ending when the chorus starts, and I thought that was kind of a nice effect. I like this track a lot, and I have a feeling that you don't hate it either.
Oh, yeah. I think the only reason I didn't choose it is just because it was easily the most familiar song to me, and so this one I feel like it's the one I remember even from when the album came out. I don't know if it was released before the album or whatever, but again, it's just another one of those catchy tunes. Steve provided a little bit more color on this track. He said, Farewell has that irresistible sing-along chorus. I always imagine dwarfs marching through the Black Forest of Bavaria singing it. It's so catchy.
Steve, that's a very specific reference. I want to like, we're not going with generalizations here. We're going with very poignant remarks.
Not elves, but dwarves. I want to make sure
that's
that
very
what
I'm
clear.
saying. I want to be clear.
He also said, it's so catchy you simply can't help but join in. Chris sounds much younger on this record. His voice is incredibly clean, and you can hear the hunger and determination to push the band to the top. So yeah, I mean, also like one of the things I've always noticed about Freedom Call is like, and I don't know if Chris is the one who does this or not, but like there's like this really deep, like almost bassy vocal that is like layered over it, and I assume that it's Chris because it's been like a staple of Freedom Call sound all the way up till now. But this song does like a really cool thing where it kind of slows down a little bit, and then there's like this build to the solo portion. Really good soloing, I think, on this. And then you get to like that part where it's like you could picture everyone in the crowd clapping before the chorus jumps back in. I mean, this is just one of those great live tunes. Freedom Call has so many of them, but this is definitely another one of them.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. And I think that the first three tracks, again, are very reminiscent of the first album. But as we start to move ahead here, we start to experiment with some other stuff. And I think the first time you hear that is on Pharaoh, the next track. Some really interesting samples and sound effects on this tune. More progressive than the debut. The rest of it has been really just straight up power metal to this point, but there's some progressive qualities here. It's slower paced, and you're almost waiting for it to take off, but it never quite does. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a different cadence than the prior tracks. It almost feels like a ballad, but it's way too heavy for that. Not my favorite song on the album. It actually reminds me a lot of what Gamma Ray was doing around this time. This reminds me of like a lost Gamma Ray tune that maybe Zimmerman, not that he wrote the song necessarily, although he does have writing credits on the entire thing, but this almost feels like a Gamma Ray holdover track.
I can see that. It actually, to me, is like a predecessor or precursor to songs like Blackened Sun, which is one of my favorite Freedom Call songs, but just it's Freedom Call kind of showing that they don't have to just do upbeat anthemic, power metal songs, there's also like a good mid-tempo, like, this one's definitely more of like that mid-tempo kind of march vibe. But I'm going to call this song Justice for Egypt because I don't
we always talk about this.
I don't like what is it, Pharaoh from Divine Wings of Tragedy?
Yes.
I hate
Pharaoh.
Pyramid of Cheops, Pork Cheops by Yngwie. I think Ed Guy had like a Pharaoh song on Mandrake that I wasn't a fan of. So we finally have a Pharaoh song that I can get behind. This is great, and I think that the album needed, after those first 3 tracks of that were just blistering, something to just kind of like slow down the pace a little bit. And I like this song a lot. Like I said, like there's the pacing on this album is perfect. There's again, not one song I think is subpar. Really like it. And Freedom Call just does such a great job with those layered vocals during the chorus. Like it just sounds like there's all of these Chris Bays singing at one time. And this is another outstanding song that I think Chris Bay and Dan Zimmerman were a really special songwriting duo.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. A really nice change of pace, because when you go to Call of Fame, the next track, this is more traditional speedy power metal with that big over-the-top feel. The double bass drums are going, and the orchestration, which I'll use the word again, this bombastic feel with the orchestration on Call of Fame. The verses are fast and in your face, and while the chorus is very good, my one complaint is that the cadence is nearly identical, and if you're not listening, you almost miss the transition between the two. But this is a good track. Obviously, it stands out because of how different Pharaoh is, but it's well placed, smack dab in the middle of the album.
These guys can write an intro to a song. Like, you are hooked immediately. You hear that first 6 seconds, and you're like, yeah, I'm ready. Here, play the rest. I want to hear the whole thing. Like, it's so catchy, and definitely echoing your thoughts on just the drumming is just so great. I mean, when you don't get a lot of albums that are co-written in its entirety by a drummer. And so it's cool that like Dan had a lot of creative input on this. I imagine that he didn't have nearly as much in his time in Gamma Ray, but it really shows his strength as a songwriter. Another really great song, just another like super fast, fun, anthemic. I love that. Like after the solo section, there's like almost a reprise of that intro again before they circle back to the chorus before the song comes to an end. But really, another outstanding tune. It's just I can't say enough good things about this album.
And it's great because, again, if we would have recorded this episode in 2003, I don't think I would have been saying this stuff. I really don't. And I'm just being honest, right? Like, we swore to each other from day one we would always be honest with the reviews. And I just never cared for this album. Not that it was bad. I always thought it was a good album. But I think it's a great album, and I just completely missed how great it was, back then. And Heart of a Rainbow is another one. What are your thoughts on this one, the 7th track?
Also wonderful. Not that should be much of a surprise. I will say one of the things I thought was interesting was that kind of keyboard intro sounds just like some songs that Sasha went on to write for Halloween, like that same keyboard tone. And so I always believed that Sasha had some sort of like writing credit with Freedom Call, but it doesn't appear that he did on this album. But like, if you go back and listen to some of the songs he wrote for Halloween at the beginning of his tenure there, I think there was a bonus track on the Keeper Legacy album that in particular, but it almost sounds like that exact same keyboard. I don't know if Charlie was producing at that time. I don't know what it was, but like there's something I remember thinking at the time that I was like, oh my God, this Halloween song sounds like Freedom Call. I remember thinking that at the time, and then looking and seeing that Sasha wrote it, and I was like, wow, that tracks.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But this is another song I really like. It also does that thing where in the middle it kind of slows down, and there's kind of like a more deliberate portion of the song. And then the solo section comes back in. There's some really prominent keyboard soloing here, which is cool because the band doesn't really have an official keyboard player. It's really just Chris Bay doing it. And so that's a really nice addition, I think. And then it's not quite as fast as like Rise Up or Farewell or Freedom Call, but it's definitely faster than Pharaoh. But it's just another really good song. I mean, I feel like I'm just repeating a lot of talking points here because a lot of the songs just have those same like peaks for me, but I like this one a lot. I'm excited to talk about the next two tracks just because I feel like they're kind of two of the most different and probably two of the most unique songs that Freedom Call had up until this point.
Yeah, I'm going to get into those. I'll keep it brief with Heart of a Rainbow. I'll just say that, again, I think this one also has a big-time gamma ray feel. And the lead-in to the chorus, it has this whimsical feel to it, even though the chorus itself is pretty standard power metal. It's those keyboards and the bass lines underneath that make a good song really, really enjoyable. I think that that's what helps make it really stand out, which is interesting because in other tracks we're saying it's the drums or the vocals, but here it's really the keys and those bass line. But then we get to the Quest, and this one is a fascinating tune because, to your point, this was just a bit different. First of all, it's over 7.5 minutes long. It's the epic tune on the album. A lot of pianos, and it almost starts of more of a ballad, a piano ballad, but it gets heavier when the rest of the band ultimately joins in. Arguably the heaviest song on the album, if it wasn't the one I mentioned earlier, this might be it. This song gets rather heavy. And it's interesting because I don't remember this one. I remember the album generally, and I remembered everything to this point, but this was like hearing it almost for the first time. There's some really nice changes of pace here. And the guitar tone is also really good and really interesting because it too changes in spots. And perhaps my favorite bridge of all of them. I think this tune is really good, and you could see that the songwriting was getting better on this album with tracks like this.
Steve had mentioned The Quest is a live setlist classic, though not my personal favorite. It's a bit of a plotter that drags on a little too much for me. I don't agree with Steve on this song. I think that this song is perfect the way that it is. I'll admit the piano.
He may just be talking about the live setting, and maybe he's true. Right. Maybe this isn't a live song that's great, but on the album, I wouldn't want to hear this live. There's other songs I would want to hear more, but I think that it is a really good tune on the album.
Yeah, the way that it opens with that grand piano intro, I was like waiting for like Bobby Roode to come out and be like glorious, or it also reminded me a little bit of the piano intro to A Day in Verse by Eternity X. Go look that up in the archives. Love just the piano and Chris's vocals at the beginning. Just that's it. I feel like I would listen to a whole album of just Chris singing with piano. It's really this really beautiful combination. But then the song, about a minute in, just it kicks in, and much like Pharaoh, it maintains this kind of mid-tempo vibe. Although, like you said, it does remain heavy throughout. And it does a really good job of just being this really interesting song that even though it's a 7.5 minute power metal song, it really doesn't wear out its welcome at any point. And it's perfectly placed towards the end of the middle of the album, so to speak. I think that it's perfect. Again, like the pacing on this album, putting this after Call of Fame and Heart of the Rainbow, which were two faster paced tracks. I feel like you really go on a journey with this album where it's not just an hour of getting your face melted off, where there's actually some parts like in this song in particular that are pensive or contemplative and maybe a little bit proggier. But I think this is an outstanding tune, and I would be more than happy to hear them play it live. I just think it's really an epic tune for a band that isn't necessarily known for writing epic songs, but it's a good one. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I well said. Steve mentioned how his song of the week would have been Ocean, and I have to say, even though I chose Rise Up, Ocean was a really close second. The strings at the start of this give it just a completely different feel than anything we've heard to this point on the album. And then all of a sudden the double bass drum takes over, but at least at the start, it has a really different vibe. The song almost has a feeling of a finality or finality to it. And I almost thought that they could have closed the album with it if they didn't have the last two tracks. But it turns out that the last track is actually a very good closing tune as well. One of the best choruses on the album, and much better than I remember it. The Ocean is just so catchy. Easy song of the week candidate. It's just thoroughly enjoyable. I'm not saying they're reinventing power metal here, but it's just a great song.
I toyed with it as song of the week as well. I just think it's an outstanding tune. Again, just a chorus that is so catchy. I was singing along with this one throughout the week while I was listening to it. Boy, it made work such an easier thing this week, getting to listen to this like just upbeat, fun music. I'll share Steve's extended thoughts on this one. He said, my standout track has to be Ocean. It begins as a true epic with delicate keys flowing through a beautiful chord sequence, polyrhythmic drums, and power chords from heaven. The bass, the production, the drumming, everything about the intro feels massive. Chris's controlled vibrato and emotional delivery are fantastic. Just when you think you've hit the chorus, you realize it's only the pre-chorus, then the real chorus lands with full force. The double kick work and drum fills are so tight, I could listen to them all day. The harmonies lift you up and send you flying over the ocean to paradise. So, better than anything I would have said. But I just say
once he said polyrhythmic, he had me because I don't even know what that means. But I appreciate it. So very good.
We're gonna do an episode with Steve where he's gonna teach us music theory.
That's a bonus episode. That's gonna be a Patreon exclusive. Yeah, great track. I think all three of us are in agreement. And then you get to Palace of Fantasy, which is the penultimate track. And probably the other one that I just didn't really remember. It has a slower cadence. It actually reminds me a lot of some of their newer material. Like this, I feel like is a glimpse into the future. And my initial thoughts were that it was a decent song, but like kind of well placed at the back of the album. I thought the backing vocals really had a place to shine on what I would call maybe a pedestrian chorus. And then the guitar riffs just grew on me throughout the week. And so it went from a song that I thought was decent to one that I actually liked quite a bit. Again, with the benefit of listening to it, 4 or 5 times.
The chorus in and of itself maybe is a bit pedestrian, like you said, but I think that the use of, again, those like that chorus, like layered vocals.
Are you going to say polyrhythmic?
No, because I don't know what it means. I think it just adds this gravitas to the song that that I think just makes it better than maybe it would have been otherwise. I wanted to like call this like my least favorite song on the album, but I don't think I have a least favorite song on the album. Yeah,
I agree, and it might have been at the outset, but it grew on me. But I do think that the way this album ends. Do you have any other thoughts? Because I want to get to The Wanderer. I have a lot of things I want to say.
Please continue.
About So this album ends, and I said to you earlier, I thought that they could have ended it with The Ocean, but the reality is The Wanderer, for a track that ends this album at 3 minutes and 46 seconds, has an epic feel to it. It really does, and I think it makes for a very good ending track. there's something that about the beginning of this song that just puts a smile on your face. You can't help but smile when listening to this. The strings are prominent, the keys are prominent, and even the lyrics give it this sense of finality or this triumphant end. And I love how it picks up the last minute or so of the song. And so if I was going to pick like a third song of the week, it would have been The Wanderer. I just thought it was a great way to end the album.
I will circle back just for a second to Palace of Fantasy, just because I actually feel like that song reminds me quite a bit of the first album, whereas The Wanderer almost, there's a lot of things going on here that remind me of Freedom Call material yet to come.
Okay.
And one of the things I think is a really, one of the things you notice right away within the first minute of the song is there's this part where it really is just Chris singing. And rather than like your typical keyboards, it sounds almost more like a harpsichord, and it gives it like this folky kind of vibe before it gets back into the that just super catchy, almost like, you know, have your beer mug and you know, sway back and forth. Like there's something very like all your buds at the bar drinking a beer. Like there's just something very inviting and just I don't know. It's such a great song. I feel like it was such a great choice to close the album. And I'll mention Steve's last comments because he made some comments about this track. He said, "The Wanderer is the perfect album closer. The super catchy lyrics grab you immediately while Dan proves himself a superhuman drummer. The tom work and sweeping power chords are hugely impressive. Add in the driving guitars, strong keyboard phrasing, and a key change that makes everything even more uplifting. And you've got a fantastic way to finish the album." And I really can't disagree at all. This is one of the biggest surprises of any album that we've covered, in particular something that I chose. I've managed to surprise myself, or really Freedom Call surprised me with an album that they released over 25 years ago. But again, that's why we do this. So yeah, I feel like there are no warts on this album. There's not even a point where I feel like there's like a dip in the quality. Like it is just where I feel like this overtakes that first album, as I feel like there's a couple of dips on that, whereas I don't feel like there's any dipping, keep dipping, as they say, on this album at all. I just think it's just that consistent.
When I dip, you dip, we dip, but we're not dipping. So I guess that puts a bow on that.
That's next week's episode. We're going to talk about that song.
I want to thank Steve for the comments. What he's able to articulate things that I just can't put into words in many respects. But and
we have a new thing to put on a shirt, polyrhythmic.
There you go. I'm going to get on that. But kidding aside, the way this was a complete revelation to me, and I want to give the scores and whatnot, but I think we'd be remiss. You did ask me to listen to 3 acoustic tracks on the Silent Empire EP, which is really a companion piece to this album in many respects. It's 3 acoustic tracks from this album, all of which have a really different feel, I think, than the original tracks for which they cover. So let's talk about this, and then we can give the scores. How does that sound?
Excellent. There's literally a review for this EP that the title is Ballads Ahoy. So
that's great. When I listened to the first track, Freedom Call, it was like this folky version of the original. It was the way it was constructed, I thought was really interesting, and I thought it was a good track. I don't know that it was my favorite of the 3. I think one of them is probably better, but I recognized it. Whereas when you get to The Quest, it almost sounds like a completely different song, the way they've kind of put it together. And I think the most true to form cover is Hymn to the Brave. That sounds a lot like the original song. I just want to get your thoughts on these 3 tracks, but I'm glad you made me listen to it because I don't know that I've ever heard this EP, but I thought that they were kind of experimenting and pushing boundaries with this for an EP that really nobody talks about.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine how many people even own it. One of the things that I really like about this is that Chris Bay sings the songs a little bit differently. He doesn't just repeat the same thing that he sang on the originals. He kind of gives it its own flair in this acoustic setting. I thought Freedom Call wouldn't be a song that would translate to an acoustic version, and this proves me very wrong. It's really good. The Quest is another one where it's such a the original track is such a beast of a track, but the acoustic version just has like this pared down version of it that still, I think, keeps all of the epicness to it, but just in a quieter sort of way, I guess. But I thought that this was really good, especially like the parts where there's solos and stuff, because you're getting more of those acoustic guitar solos, which you really don't get a lot of with Freedom Call. And Into the Brave is just him is a perfect word to describe this song, because it was a really like great, like, you know, put your lighter up in the air and sway back and forth kind of tune. And I think the acoustic version keeps the heart of the song, but again, just has a little bit more of a like the muted drums and the acoustic guitar, but it works. There's
Do you have
also
a favorite of the three?
probably The Quest if I had to pick one out of the three, but I think they're all three songs do really well in an acoustic setting.
Yeah, no, I think they're really. I think it provides a nice counterpoint to the songs themselves, because they don't just try to do the same thing. They try to do something a little bit different and almost reimagine the tune. So I like them a lot. So
there's actually another version of Him to the Brave that they've released as probably a bonus track or on a compilation a few years later. That's a piano version, and that's really good too. That feels almost more like a ballad. So they've definitely done a few versions of the song, and it really works in all different sorts of ways. It's a very, versatile tune.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I'm going to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are you giving Crystal Empire? And I should remind you, you gave Stairway to Fairyland an 8.375, which is a really solid score. What's the second album?
I think I was surprised that I rated that album at that low. I think that going into it, I would have assumed it was like a 9. But I think even after I went back and listened to it again this week, back to back with Crystal Empire, there are some of my favorite Freedom Call songs of all time. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like once they get towards the end of the album, it's almost like and there's a very good chance I said this exact same thing. They ran out of steam after Tears of Tarragon. It felt like maybe they front loaded the album because it was like one sick song after the other. But then after track 7, it was almost like, I don't know, like there was almost like a dip in quality. And whereas to me, Crystal Empire never loses the steam. So I'm going to give this one a 9.375.
Wow.
This is really a revelation for me. And it's going to be one of those albums that I think I'm going to go back to a lot now that I'm actually familiar with it start to finish. But I was not, after like almost a dozen times listening to it, I wasn't tired of listening to it. I mean, it was just really, really enjoyable. So I would not have guessed that I would have rated this a full point higher than the first album, but I mean, it is what it is. Like you said, we're always honest. And so that's where I have it. I assume you're going to give a score higher than the debut as well, if I had to guess.
I'm actually going to go right with it as an 8. I had the debut as an 8. I have this as an 8 as well. I think the highs of the highs might be on the debut, but I also agree with you that this is maybe a more complete album from start to finish. Again, I'm not trying to be nitpicky. I think Palace of Fantasy was the one track that was a little less than the colleagues, if you will. But a really solid album. And if I was guessing, I probably would have said this is a 6.5 going into the week, just based on my recollection. Again, solid, slightly above average, but nothing to write home about. So my jump is not nearly as big as yours, but at the same time, that's a tremendous jump to go from what I perceive to be a 6.5 to an 8. Again, you're in rarefied air once you start getting 8.5, 9. And so I'm not going to say that, but it is really bordering on being an all-time classic. And I'm just glad that you loved it as much as you did.
I had listened to it a handful of times before I even told you that we were going to be covering it. And so I think at that point when I told you, I said to myself, I think Justin's going to feel differently about this than he did when it first came out, because that's pretty much how I felt as well. So I'm glad to see that that was the case for both of us.
Yeah, totally agree. I am going to reveal my album for next week. But before I do, we've got some news to talk about, some big news. After much anticipation and lots of internet chatter and guesses galore, Nevermore has finally announced their new music. So joining Jeff Loomis and Van Williams, welcome the following: Jack Katoy on guitars, Samir Ozarkan on bass, and new vocalist Berzon Onin to the fold. The band has also announced their first live show, April 1st, 2026 in Istanbul. I should note that the singer and the bass player are Turkish, so it's almost a homecoming of sorts for them. I know folks that are going to that show in April. They are extremely excited, and with good reason. The band dropped a 35 or 37-minute video with live footage kind of introducing them to the world. And so anyone that had any doubt whether or not this gentleman could sing like Warrell Dane, I think those questions have been answered. And it just seems to be the talk of the metal world. Everybody is talking about this, and with good reason. I think that some people were approached this with a little bit of trepidation. Others were obviously really excited and in many cases blown away. I think the real proof of the pudding will be the new album and the lyrics and the vocal lines and just some of the conceptual pieces that come along with the heavy music that Nevermore provides. Time will tell on that, but I have no doubt that at Prague Power they will perform a blistering set for the 90 minutes or so that they're on stage.
Yeah, this is very exciting news, and I think just something that a lot of people were waiting to find out. I think anybody who was expecting like a big name to be announced as the vocalist may be disappointed, but for me, I didn't really. I was kind of hoping that they would go in this direction where they went with who they felt was the best fit and not the biggest name, because, you know, people were talking about, you know, Elisa White Glues and, you know, name your vocalist who needed a home, you know, in the last two or 3 months. People joked that it would be Fabio Leone, which I don't think anybody really, you know, gave any real credence to. But I look forward to it. I think people are excited, and I think the people that are skeptical, I think the band's going to win them over. Honestly, I thought that our friend Adam made a really, really good point when we have a group chat with our Patreon members via Facebook, and he said something that I thought was really, really interesting. He said, he's about as good as it gets when it comes to replicating Warrell's voice. What interests me most, though, is his lyrics and what he brings to the table in that regard. Hopefully he's an interesting person with something to say beyond his undeniable vocal talent. I like that they chose a Turkish singer. It's a tough place to grow up, marked by political oppression and many of the social issues Nevermore has always explored. Hopefully he'll be able to bring some of that into the band in a truly genuine and intense way from a perspective that's unique to him.
Could not agree more. I agree with every word of that.
Just beautifully said by our friend Adam. So thank you for that. But yeah, I think what, we touched on when we talked about Nevermore previously is that Warl really had a lot to do with the music. He wasn't just the voice. There was a lot of his heart went into that band. So, I didn't even think of that. So I'm really glad that Adam mentioned it, but, we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to some full length songs being, released. Like, I never really got into Nevermore back then, so I'm gonna kind of treat them as like a new band. And when the new album comes out and the new songs, like, I'm just gonna go into it with kind of a clean slate. And I'm looking forward also to seeing them at Prague Power. It sounds like they'll definitely get some reps in at other shows before September rolls around. So exciting news.
No doubt. And 3 new albums that have been announced. I just want to make mention of these. All bands that we've covered in some form or another on the podcast, but new music from Evergrey, Anthrax, and Draconian. Evergrey has announced, and I can't believe this, their 15th studio album, Architects of a New Weave, comes out June 5th on Napalm Records. Can you believe that Evergrey has 15 albums? That's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, yes, but also no, because it feels like they release a new album every year. So, like, I guess I'm not terribly shocked. But yeah, it's crazy just to think about how long they've been around. Never mind the number of albums, but just the actual length of time this band has existed. I mean, they played at the first Prague Power, so I mean that pretty much tells you all you need to know right there.
Yeah, very well said. That's fair. Anthrax, as I mentioned, is due for a new album, tentatively due out this May. I am admittedly on a huge Anthrax kick right now. I told you how much I love their performance on the cruise. I've been listening to them a lot this week as well. So new music from them. And as I mentioned, another band that we covered relatively recently, Draconian's new album, also due out on Napalm Records, May 8th of this year, Insomnolent Ruin, which features the return of their original vocalist, at least their original frontwoman, Lisa Johansson. So I am looking forward to this album immensely. I've got high hopes for this one. And that, Steve, that puts a bow on this week. That said, we're staying in 2001 next week. We covered an album from the first quarter of 2001, and we're going to move just a few weeks ahead to cover an album by a band that we've only talked about once before, and that was shocking to me. We talked about one of the albums with this band's original vocalist, but we've not talked about this band who's had three great vocalists, but this one is the 2001 release from Threshold, their 5th studio album, Hypothetical, which came out in March of 2021. This one, of course, featuring Andrew McDermott, otherwise known as Mac, on vocals. I remember how I got this album. I remember where I was when I got it, and I remember what I felt like when I listened to it for the first time. So I've got a lot of thoughts.
I bet you remember who you were with, too.
I remember who I was with when I got it. So I'm really looking forward to this immensely.
Yeah, this is just one of those albums that I haven't listened to nearly as much as I probably should have over the years. So I'm looking forward to revisiting. There's a couple of songs on here that 3 off the top of my head that I know like the back of my hand, and the rest of them I'm gonna, you have to kind of reacquaint myself with. But
I think it'll come back to you relatively quickly.
Yeah, I think so too. Man, 2001 was there was a lot of good stuff happening that year, as we just spent an hour talking about with Freedom Call. But I mean, we going back into the archives, there's quite a few albums we've discussed from that year, and it's an interesting time because I think it's a definitely a turning point, or I don't know if a turning point's the right word, but at least in power metal, like there's kind of a shift in, you had all those classic 90s power metal albums by Stratovarius and Helloween and Angra, and it's kind of like, where do we go from here? And I feel like with Prague, Prague was almost like just hasn't even like reached its apex yet at this point in time. And this was, I think, I just remember like all of our friends talking about this album when it came out. Like it was a real, like, I remember Brian liking it. I remember Mike loving it. Like, I remember just all of our friends were like, wow, like, this felt like a breakout album. And I don't know if it really was considered that for Threshold, but in our friend group, that's what it felt like to me when it came out. So I
don't know if it's their best. I'll leave that to next week, but I will say that it did feel like the band took the next step with this album. And I think there's reasons for that, but we'll get to that and more next week. This was a lot of fun. Great choice. Thanks again to Steve for all of his comments. And we'll come back next week as we go to the UK just a few weeks later and cover Threshold's Hypothetical. Any last thoughts before I let you go?
No, I'm just kind of happy we are kind of caught up on new releases, new news, all that good stuff. So I feel like we're back in the saddle, as Aerosmith would say, and looking forward to moving forward. And hopefully I won't have to wait another 6 weeks to pick an album.
There you go. Enjoy the week, my friend. I'll catch up with you soon.
Turn on, tune in.